based here within the United Kingdom, and we have a specific role in relation to protecting critical infrastructure, and I'll come on to that shortly. But I'm also going to talk about a couple of the other things, areas of work that we do. Very keen to learn from your own experiences and your own model of how you do things within your different countries. So please come and visit us at stand 6 downstairs, because I'm keen to learn how you do things, as well as trying to let you know how we do things in the UK. We don't have a monopoly on the good ideas. In fact, some people would say we don't have any good ideas at all, but we are very keen to learn from your experiences. Okay, so I'm going to talk very briefly this morning about how we protect our crowded places, also how we look after hazardous materials, because as you can imagine, there are a number of materials across the world and in the UK that terrorist groups might want to get their hands on to be using in a terrorist attack, whether that's radioactive material, precursor chemicals, and pathogens and toxins. So we'll touch briefly on how we kind of protect those from bad guys getting hold of them. In addition to how we protect our critical infrastructure. So who are we within NaCTSO, in the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office? We are indeed a police team working alongside our colleagues in the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure. And we benefit from that symbiotic relationship where, because we are police officers within, obviously working within the police community, we have access to direct contact with our UK police forces, and we benefit from CPNI's particular subject matter experts on the effects of blast, hostile vehicle mitigation, and the research and development that they do in different parts of protective security, whether that's information security and cyber, or whether it's physical security, locks, doors, fences. They do an awful lot of research and development and testing of different products and standards for protective security measures that we can implement across the UK. We are responsible for developing protective security advice to vulnerable sites in the United Kingdom, and I'll come on to that shortly, particularly in relation to crowded places and hazardous sites, for which we kind of have the monopoly for providing that protective security advice from government. We are fortunate because there are only 12 of us within the NaCTSO office. And if you can imagine, there are thousands of sites across the United Kingdom, crowded places, infrastructure sites, and sites that hold hazardous material. There's no way that we could get round all of those with only 12 of us. So we're fortunate in that we have a network of counter-terrorism security advisors who are based within all the United Kingdom police forces. And they are our delivery mechanism for protective security advice. And we are fortunate to have them because otherwise we would never be able to do the work that we do. And as NaCTSO, we coordinate, train and task those CTSAs to make sure that they are all trained to a national standard, and the national priority taskings that we want them to do, we're able to coordinate that and make sure that they do them and measure their effectiveness. We do develop that best practice, that national consistent standard, and we also quality assure the work that our CTSAs do throughout the UK. And I'll come on to a little bit of that later on. As our mission statement says there, we do work very much in partnership with the security service MI5 to reduce the impact of terrorism in the United Kingdom. And it's because of that partnership we have, particularly with the security service, it's that we are able to make sure that our protective security advice that we develop and was delivered by our counter-terrorism security advisors is threat-informed, vulnerability-focused and impact-driven. Certainly when you think about the threat from terrorism within the United Kingdom, you only have to look at recent events where the attack methodologies and the threat evolves over time. You only have to think of soldiers getting attacked on the streets of London. You think about attack methodologies in the recent couple of weeks in Asia, for example. You've had attacks on transport and hospitals in Pakistan. We think about the future effects of the Syrian conflict and what's going to happen when some of those that are fighting potentially come back to the UK. Even within the last week or so, there's been attacks on tourist groups in northern Pakistan. So we are constantly looking at the attack methodologies across the UK and across the world to see how we can turn that into protective security advice. And it's not just the attacks, but it's also those plots that have been disrupted over the years. You think about, mentioned the transatlantic bomb plot on the airlines. We're constantly looking at those attack methodologies, not just for attacks that happen, but those plots that have been disrupted. And that's where our partnership with the security service allows us to make sure that we've got access to the latest intelligence and threat picture. So, our counter-terrorism security advisors, and as I said earlier, without this network of CTSAs, we would not be able to deliver protective security advice in the UK. There are about 230 of them at the moment. Austerity is obviously pending at the moment, so we don't know how that's going to change in the future. But at the moment, we're sitting about 230 security advisors. Some of them are police officers, some of them are civilian staff attached to police forces. And at the moment, that balance is about 60-40 police officers and police staff. And we think that balance is about right because what that does is allows us to have quite a lot of police experience within that network of CTSAs, but it also allows us to bring in some expertise and experiences that CTSAs have from working with businesses, working with industry, and working for private security firms that they can bring in and that police officers might not necessarily have. They are trained and coordinated by us, and there is a national training regime. All our CTSAs have to undertake a 2-year training program, which we deliver. And what that does is it allows us to make sure that all our CTSAs who are providing protective security advice to a range of different industries are all trained to a certain standard. And that regardless of whether you're in London, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow or Edinburgh, you should be getting a consistent advice. And it also allows us, because we've got that network of 230 specialists, it allows us to develop best practice. Our CTSAs are good at delivering locally on initiatives that they have thought of that we can then roll out nationally. As I said earlier, we do quality assure our CTSAs to make sure that what they are delivering is up to an acceptable standard, because as you will maybe know from this room, if you provide protective security advice on hostile vehicle mitigation, improved fencing or glazing, that can potentially cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. So we want to make sure that the advice that our CTSAs are giving is proportionate to the threat and to the vulnerability at each individual site. We are a key delivery part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy, and Mr. Mayor was talking about making sure that we have a national strategy for counter-terrorism, and we certainly have that in the UK, and I'll talk about that very shortly. And I think that you've got Mr. James Brokenshire, who works for the Home Office, who's giving an input tomorrow, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit more about the contest strategy. I won't go through the list of our CTSA core skills, but over that first 2 years in post, while they're under the training regime, they will get specific training in relation to these subjects. So you can see how very quickly our CTSAs, from a very small beginning will turn into specialists or have access to the latest information in relation to each of these core skills. We also have a national standard security survey form. So all our CTSAs, when they're going out and providing a report on protective security and what recommendations they can make to improve security, they're all using a standard form, regardless of where in the UK that they get, whichever form of business, whether it's part of the critical national infrastructure, whether it's part of hazardous sites and substances, or whether they're crowded places, they will have a standard format which is transposes across each of those 3 different areas of work. It is flexible because, as you can imagine, protecting a radiological source might not necessarily be the same as protecting a shopping centre. However, the form is flexible enough to be able to make sure that it's a bespoke security survey for that site. So, the UK Counter-Terrorism Strategy Contest has been in various guises since 2003, first published in 2006, and this is our ethos. This is what we work to across the United Kingdom. Whether you're pursuing terrorists as part of the Counter-Terrorism Command, whether you're trying to prevent UK citizens or those that live in our country from becoming terrorists, from being radicalised, whether you're trying to protect UK citizens, businesses, or their interests abroad, or whether you're actually trying to prepare for the consequences of a terrorist attack, this is what we work to across the CT agenda. And very much the bit that we're interested in from the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office and our network of CTSAs is that protect part. So we want to try and make sure that we're providing the best possible protective security advice to those businesses to reduce their vulnerability and impact, and therefore reducing the risk to terrorism. But it's important to note that none of us that are working within the CT agenda are working in our little silos. We're all part of that bigger contest agenda, and we make sure that there is that joined up thinking, and it's a partnership between all those different elements of the police or the security service or other agencies that deal with counter-terrorism. Okay, so protecting crowded places, and you can think, certainly if we think of terrorist attacks across the world and within the United Kingdom, certainly crowded places are an attractive target for terrorists. Usually they are pretty soft targets because crowded places are, as the name suggests, places where you want to actually welcome members of the public. So how do we actually protect in the UK our crowded places? Well, what we do is we break down our crowded places into 9 sectors. Similar to our critical national infrastructure, which I'll come on to, we have split up our crowded places into 9 different sectors. It makes it easier for us to deal with stakeholders who work within that particular sector. So, for example, the health sector, and we think back to an attack in the hospital in Pakistan only last week. We work very closely with our National Health Service, our ambulance service, and all the different agencies that work in the health sector to make sure that whatever protective security advice that we are developing and delivering is actually, we've got that stakeholder engagement. So we're not actually trying to impose protective security on anybody. We're actually working with our partners to make sure that they have buy-in from the start. One of the difficult things we have, and you think about crowded places, is some of these are not crowded places all the time. So if you think about major events, for example, pop festivals, music festivals, certain sporting events such as major golf tournaments, these aren't crowded places all the time, but actually trying to protect those for maybe 3 days a year can be quite a challenge when It's different if you've got something like Wembley or Old Trafford, which is where you can build in protective security. It's very difficult where you've got sites that aren't necessarily crowded places all the time. It's very difficult to try and persuade somebody who's running a music festival to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on physical security measures. So, equally of a challenge are places like shopping centres, bars, pubs and nightclubs, where you might not necessarily have a overt security regime. It's very difficult to try and search everybody coming into a shopping centre. It just can't be done. Shopping centres, by their very nature, welcome members of the public in. They want it to be. They want members of the public for it to be easy for them to access. Slightly different for things like sporting arenas, where you can search everybody on access. But it's very difficult to try and protect crowded places, such as shopping centres. We have developed a range of protective security guidance documents for each of those sectors. We do have some hard copies downstairs if anybody particularly wants one. They are also downloadable for free in PDF from our NaCTSO website, and please do have a look at them because they have been developed with our stakeholders. So, for example, the Places of Worship booklet has been done with various religious groups across the United Kingdom. So, how do we identify those crowded places that we want to actually target because they're of highest risk? Because there are hundreds of thousands of crowded places. Every weekend there are bars, pubs and nightclubs up and down the United Kingdom, sporting arenas that are crowded places. So how do we actually pick those crowded places that we want to focus and provide one-to-one security advice on? With the Home Office, we've come up with a crowded places risk assessment matrix. And if you are particularly interested on how we do that, please speak to my colleague Helen Scammell, who leads on this in the UK, and she's downstairs at stand number 6 if you want to tap her up for some latest information. And that is based very much on identifying attractiveness of target, vulnerability from an attack, and the impact of a terrorist attack at each location. And we've assessed, or certainly our network of CTSAs across the UK have assessed about 27,000 sites across the UK. And of those 27,000, about 350 are either high priority or medium high priority. And those 350 sites all get a one-to-one protective security survey from a member of our network of counter-terrorism security advisors. So we prioritise the work because we have a finite number of CTSAs. We need to focus on those priority sites, and that may be based on the attractiveness of the target, either because it's high profile or iconic across the world, and you can think of a few in London, but it also might be because there is already a threat or intelligence in relation to that site. Not only do we provide that security survey, but our CTSAs will actually do an annual assessment, a risk assessment at that site. So it's an ongoing process, and it's very much a key to what we do. It's a partnership between the police, government, who set the strategy, and the site owners and the CTSAs. So it's very much a partnership in making sure that we're not trying to impose security advice on somebody where there may be no legislation to say they actually have to do any of this security. It's that partnership work that's of key importance to us. So who provides that advice? We turn that strategy into good practice and to be delivered by our counter-terrorism security advisors. But more recently, we've also had assistance from the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure in relation to crowded places, and particular major events such as the Olympics, the G8 summit that we had last week in Northern Ireland. We've had assistance from our friends in the CP&I who have assisted on some of the advice, because they were very much a key part of providing protective security for the Olympics and Paralympic Games last year in London. So, in addition to those physical protective security measures, we also do a range of staff training and awareness as well, because this isn't just about building bigger fences or having better locks. It's actually about making sure that the staff that work within those crowded places actually have some sort of awareness of what the terrorist threat is. We have developed Project Argus, which was funded by the Home Office. It's a 2 or 3 hour counter-terrorism multimedia simulation. So depending on which sector, and you can see there's ones for retail, nighttime economy, Argus Professional, which is very much aimed at architects and local planners, so that actually they've got an awareness of counter-terrorism to make sure that if there are any major new buildings or refurbishment of existing buildings that are potentially going to be crowded places, that they actually build in CT protective security at the design and planning stage, rather than waiting to retrofit these protective security methods, which can be very expensive once your building is built. And I think we've got a little clip, and we'll see if it works.
Here's a question. Why, time and again, do we hesitate before we ask someone what they're doing, or tell someone that we suspect something, or even admit to ourselves that something, someone, is making us feel uneasy?
Okay, so that's just a short clip, a montage of some of our Argus events. They are very much aimed at management within an organisation within the crowded places sectors. In addition to Project Argus, we also have Project Griffin, which is similar in some respects, but this is very much aimed at security staff or front of house staff, so it might be receptionists and anybody else that deals with members of the public. And the key elements of Project Griffin are that we will also always make sure that our Griffin events give a presentation on the current threat. In our case, it's to the United Kingdom. Hostile reconnaissance, how to spot hostile reconnaissance and what to do, whether you're going to actually confront somebody who you think is acting suspiciously and who to report it to. And we also look at methods of attack. So we're not just looking at a rucksack bomb, we're looking at suspicious vehicles, we're looking at weapons and firearms attack. But depending on the audience, whether it's within the crowded places or it might be within the critical national infrastructure, we can also provide a range of other presentations within that event as well. So it may well be about identifying different types of IED. It may well be anything else that they would be particularly interested in. So it might be information in relation to a chemical, biological, or radiological attack. So that's Project Griffin. We also, in fact, hazardous sites and substances is very interesting from us from a NaCTSO point of view. It's because it's where we started. NaCTSO wasn't born out of a need to protect our crowded places. It was actually born out of the need to protect the UK or protect hazardous substances from being used by terrorists or other criminals. And that was after the anthrax attacks in the US in 2001. And it's the one area of work that we have where we have legislation that actually says if you hold hazardous sites, hazardous materials, and the CTSA comes along and gives you protective security advice, you actually have to do what he asks you to do within reason, obviously. So it's of huge importance to us, that work on hazardous sites and substances. So moving on to national infrastructure, similar to crowded places, it's split into nine sectors, as you can see there, and it's about that delivering essential services to the UK. And this is the bit about partnership approach to protecting our critical national infrastructure that I wanted to focus on. And it is about that partnership between the site operator, government, CP&I, and ourselves in the police. The government have the lead sector responsibility for each of those different sectors. And they're the ones responsible for assessing what's critical within that sector. The CP&I are the ones that deliver that protective security advice and also look at cross-sector interdependencies. So, for example, one site might be critical to the energy sector, but it also might be critical to another sector as well. And the police bit, which is where we come in, is about making sure that any incidents at those critical national infrastructure sites, there is a proportionate police response. So, if it's an armed attack or a suspicious package, we as the police and CTSAs and NaCTSO are responsible for making sure there is that proper, adequate police response. And all our C&I sites within the United Kingdom are all flagged on our police force command and control systems to make sure that if an incident happens at a particular location, they will be responded to by the police. And we also make sure that there are adequate contingency plans at all those sites to deal with a range of threats or a range of incidents. So that might be an armed response, it might be a helicopter response, or it may be just a uniform officer on his bicycle, depending on the nature of the threat. So, just to kind of wrap up then, the UK approach, it's about that national and local partnership working. From our point of view, that national partnership is down to us at NaCTSO so that we have links with strategic partners. But crucially, it's that local partnership between the CTSAs, the businesses, the local authorities that make sure that they are engaging with local stakeholders to provide the best possible protective security advice. We've got continuous professional development of our CTSAs to make sure that they are properly trained, that they are up to date with their attack methodologies and the current threat from terrorists within the UK. And the important bit for us, and I'm not sure how this works in other areas of the world, is that all our CTSAs are centrally funded by government. So we have no commercial interests whatsoever. We don't advocate using a particular product or advocate using a particular firm. What we do is we ensure that all our protective security advice is to a minimum standard. So we promote the use of a minimum standard and products and firms that have demonstrated that they can meet that minimum standard of protective security advice. All our CTSAs are nationally trained and accredited. They all have to do a training programme. They all provide a uniform approach across the United Kingdom, and they all have to do a qualification administered by the City and Guilds Institute in the United Kingdom. And equally important is we have that robust quality assurance whereby every year we will go and visit CTSAs within their police forces, and we will exactly examine the security advice and the other products that they've been delivering within their particular police force area. So thank you for your time. I hope that's kind of given you a flavour of what we do within the United Kingdom. It is a model that's been developed and refined over the last kind of 10 years, and it is that partnership that is key from government down to the individual site operators and site owners. Come and visit us downstairs, please, at stand number 6. We'll exchange some details. All the information that I've given you, or most of the information I've given you today, is available on our website, and you can download any of those protective security guides for free by PDF, as I say, from our website. So if you have any questions, quite happy to answer them at the end, or come and visit us over the next couple of days at stand 6. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil, for a very comprehensive talk on the UK strategy to critical infrastructure protection. Now, I would